I'd like to actually start by just recognizing kind of and honoring where we are, in Melbourne, and you know what a weird start this particular city had in terms of things like gold, and but here we are, a couple of hundred years later after the first colonial, proper colonial incursion, and we're at a really interesting point in time where it kind of feels like it's the end of this colonization process. We're in a decolonization trend where the colonized minds, the minds of the colonists, are now being routed either towards a type of AI and human interface with technology, or connecting back to the original kind of blueprint. And so a little bit more about who I am is I was born in South Africa, lived for about 10 years in London before I came here to the tropical rainforests of northern New South Wales, Byron Bay.
What originally drew you to Byron Bay from London?
Well, I was born in South Africa. I was a bush boy. I was totally into nature. I had a menagerie in my garden. I had birds and chameleons and tortoises and snakes and lizards and you name it, pets. And I loved nature. And then I went to university. I studied oceanography and marine biology and zoology and botany, and then just the way in which it was being presented at university from like an outsider looking in was just totally not. I wanted the immersive experience of being in amongst it, and it was kind of like white coats looking at it.
Yeah.
And that kind of put me off, and I went twisting off. Ended up in London working in kind of the music industry and kind of sex, drugs and rock and roll fashion, Summer of Love, early 90s.
Yeah.
And it was a time when I went through my first great kind of awakening experience through psychoactive substances. And for me it was like this, like, what's going on here? Like, how come everyone's living as if they're living in a lie when it's so obvious what the truth is, kind of thing. And then realized there was a whole subculture of people that had obviously started in the 60s, this awakening process. And so I became fascinated in that and fully immersed in the occult and read books, everything from Steiner all the way across to Golden Bough, and, looking at earth wizards like Victor Schauberger, and then, everything across to Aleister Crowley, and Eastern mysticism. And the more I jumped in, and then the more, plants I became interested in, whether it was mushrooms or ayahuasca or washuma, it started to help my body remember what it was doing here on the planet and tune in to, I guess, my greater mission.
Yep.
And so there were lots of amazing, beautiful experiences through my life that then became meaningful in that context, whereas before that was just random. This car crash over here, or this thing that happened over here, that were just accidents, then I realized had shaped the direction of my life. So living in London after 10 years, London being kind of my spiritual birthplace, and not just London, because every weekend I'd drive out to Snowdonia in Wales or Devon or Silbury Hill and Avebury and Stonehenge and incredible crop circles and stone monuments, England's chock-a-block. And so leaving, I felt like it was like a chrysalis, and then once I burst out of that kind of consciousness, I was like, no, I need to like find a place place that's nurturing on a whole nother level, like back to the source kind of thing, and ended up traveling around the world looking for a place, and went to all the places that I thought were the most beautiful places on earth, from Hawaii and Bali and Mexico and Costa Rica, and then came back to London quite disappointed that I hadn't found something that quite fitted the bill and called me. But then when I ended up in, a friend a week later after me getting back said, "Did you go to Byron Bay?" And I said, "No." And they went, "You'll like Byron Bay." And it was like I got that tingle. And then a few months later, he bought us a couple of tickets and he said, "Let's go." And we ended up in Byron Bay, and I literally got off the plane and went, "Wow, this is it." It was like stepping into a dream. And then so I moved into the rainforests in northern New South Wales and built myself a house out of timber with the next door neighbour, and kind of got immersed in jungle or northern New South Wales rainforest culture, which was all those birds and plants. And it's so strange, a lot of the plants that I was growing in my barn that I lived in London, like bird's nest ferns and bangalow palms, staghorn ferns, when I got to northern New South Wales, they were the plants growing out there. So it was kind of like I was walking into like a dream that I'd hatched in London. It was totally bizarre. And so as way of an intro, that's then going in 2000 to the jungle, which I dreamed of going to as a kid, the Amazon, and then set me on a whole different path, because it was 12 years, roughly 10 years earlier, that Terence McKenna was sitting in my living room talking about ayahuasca. And I remember when he said that word, it was like, wow, I know that stuff. What is that?
Yeah.
And waited patiently till I could get to the jungle in 2000 and drink ayahuasca for the first time. And in my first vision, kind of unfolded this whole life story.
Yeah, wow. If we can just digress a bit, how did you end up with Terence McKenna in your living room?
Well, yeah, a friend of mine, Norbert, a photographer from Germany, he was living in London, and we would go tripping together regularly, and he gave me a cassette tape, and he said, "Have you heard of this guy, Terence McKenna? He's a linguist." And I was like, "Yeah, that's weird. I just heard someone mention his name the other day," and I put on this tape, and I was just like, "Whoa, this guy is like out there." And within a week, the road I lived on was Woodchurch Road, and there was a guy, his name I can't recall right now. He had been publishing a magazine called The Psychedelic Experience since I think the late 60s, and we were friendly. He knocked on the door and said, "Hey Dan, do you know of this guy Terence McKenna?" And I said, "Yeah, I've just recently heard about him." And he said, "Well, he's coming to town next week, and we're going to have him at our nightclub, and we're looking for a venue for him to come and speak." So I said, my front room, was a big open kind of like warehousey type space.
Just give me one
And then he just arrived.
I just realised I've actually managed to put the mic on back to front. It's a proper rookie mistake. I still reckon
But it probably still works.
I still think it works. And what I'm going to do...
Give it a pause and turn it around.
Well, I won't even pause it. I'll just pull it in, put it straight out the other way. But keep telling us about Terence McKenna while I turn the mic. Fuck. Okay, so the other thing I was actually thinking with these podcasts as well, because I've seen a lot of people do podcasts, but if you actually took the time, because I know that Dan and I have both lectured and given workshops at quite a few festivals around Australia over the years, but actually going through, because when you're doing a presentation, inevitably you end up talking about a lot of similar stuff. If we potentially, went through, if you took the time to have a look at this in the future, and you went through and things that you talked about, you could just say, okay, at this minute, I want you to put in this picture. And that way, if you can imagine if a podcast and someone was watching it on YouTube and they had the picture that helped to illustrate the story, just literally comes in from a screen, it comes on the screen over the podcast when you're talking about a certain thing. You know how you do in a lecture?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if there are any points that you feel as if a picture could aid you, let me know. And then I'll remind you in the future, and you can potentially send that image from Byron Bay into the sky, into my cell phone. I'll upload that onto my Mac, and then potentially edit the video later on. And if you are watching this in the future and there are no pictures involved,
means we've been lazy shits.
Yeah, just remind me in the comments below. Yeah, cool. All right, so we had Terence McKenna in London was where we left off, in your living room.
Yeah, and so that kind of inspired me to start looking into ayahuasca and what ayahuasca was, and then I'd gone to the Amazon in 2000 and gone to a small. It was quite a big village, but back then it was probably quite a bit smaller than it is today. Shipibo village called San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I ended up drinking 5 days straight in a row, and it was just like this weird kind of shift that occurred in my life. But it was only when I came back to South Africa, to Australia, and thought, you know, I really wanted to replicate that jungle experience, but with the Australian twist, that I started to discover that not only had dimethyltryptamine been discovered and explored in the acacias of the area, but that they were all through Australia. And then the idea to make acacia teas.
Well, it's a very
and then finding out that had been potentially, people had been doing that for thousands of years.
Exactly what I was going to bring up.
But being rediscovered.
Yeah.
And that was part of the dream that was originally unfolded for me when I first was in the Amazon.
Yeah.
And that's been a beautiful medicine path from here, and it's interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah, wow. Yeah, so how many times do you think you have experienced ayahuasca in your lifetime? If you could put a rough number.
I don't know. Ayahuasca itself, maybe 100 times or something. But some acacia, which is the acacia with the Syrian rue.
Yeah.
You know, probably 400 or 500 times.
Yeah, wow.
And that was, I think that was because when I was learning about it and I was dieting on it, I was doing it virtually once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I was literally cooking and drinking almost every weekend, and friends would come around, and you know, so there was informal little circles, but and whether I was drinking on my own or with people, I was just in an intense, deep learning experience about myself, about microbes, about the plants, about the forest. And a lot of the information is just now slowly repercolating and synthesizing into much more clear and coherent bodies of, dare I say, wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, please don't use the W word on the Placebo Show and audio podcast. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I suppose that's one of the fields that I'm not all that knowledgeable about, but I did have given Dan a hand in the past with some of his work, looking at the microbiology in the soils. And maybe you gave me a plug with a Good Brew kombucha earlier on. Do you want to tell us? Dan's got an amazing product, and it's called Enormous. And it's a mixture of quite a few different things that we showed at Starseed that we were getting far more growth from it. Could you explain to us what is in the enormous product and why it would be of potential benefit to utilize this, with your plants if you're eventually going to actually eat those plants?
That's a great question. So enormous itself, I kind of shelved it a little bit, put it on the back burner because I was so focused on getting Starseed, and still am getting Starseed up and running because of the importance. I think it's
an ongoing project.
Yeah. But I've just relaunched in South Africa under a new brand, and I wouldn't say I've just relaunched. My cousin and myself, he's launching, and I'm assisting him under another brand called Transformers, and so it's stuff I've learned, but it's actually a slightly different technology and formulation.
Yeah, right. I'm interested. I've used enormous, and I'm interested in hearing this formulation.
So, but the enormous still exists, and I'll tell you about how I came about it and what I think it does. So it was basically 4 main ingredients. One was ormus made from seawater, which itself is a whole long story. Another was a fulvic acid, zeolite, and a stuff called hydrogrow, which is essentially plant oils made into like a biosurfactant.
Yeah. Could you tell us about the like the minerals that are in fulvic acid and how they could potentially help with growth?
Yeah. I'll start first with the ormus because
sure.
In the hierarchy of things, ormus, for those people watching this podcast, there's a world of information out there on ormus. I think still the kind of main hub is subtleenergies.com, moderated by Barry Carter, who came out here. I basically bought him out here, would have been 12, 13 years ago. Funnily enough, when after drinking Somacacia, literally showed me the whole story or history of ormus and said, get in touch with this guy and bring him to Australia. And I was just like, okay. And that's what we did. And when I brought him here, I got him on the phone. I said, look, I know this is going to sound strange, but I've been told to bring you out to the country. And he was just, that wasn't strange to him at all. He just said, yeah, this happens all the time. He got on a plane, came out here, we toured around the country, met the most amazing alchemists that came out of the woodwork, and he taught the wet method, how to make seawater ormus. And there was a couple of interesting blackfellas that turned out. One is a man who's passed, a guy called Jerry Bostock, who just arrived at the Sydney workshop, standing at the back, and I walked up to him and I said, hey, what's going on? Do you want to come and join us? And he said, yeah, my ancestors told me to come here and attend, but I don't know if I'm here to teach or learn, but it seems like both. And so he sat through the whole thing and he said, yeah, I'm familiar with all the stuff, the Sumerian and the Egyptian history and lineage. And he went off and made some and took it to some of the elder mob out west, and they drank it and went, yeah, we remember this.
Yeah, right.
And they were still making it up till the time of his death a few years ago. Apparently they're still making it, connecting the water from a sacred site out to sea, off Byron Bay, like a kilometre out. So what it is you can almost is like chi or prana or orgone or biophotons. It's the living energy, light energy, out of which all things are animated.
Yeah.
And it's like spirit. It's kind of like the interface between spirit and matter. And so when you extract it out of seawater, seawater itself is a whole bunch of minerals and micronutrients and metals, all in perfect proportion, like the blood. micro sizes or smaller that are super bioavailable. And so not only does it add like a mineral complex, for example, if you put it on the soil or if you take it as a human, the Egyptians were taking it for wellness and longevity and in fact immortality and higher states of consciousness. And so when you feed it to the soil or the gut, the microbes in the soil, which happen to be the same microbes in your stomach, when you feed it to them, what happens is they then tap into this unlimited source of energy. It's like them breathing light directly. And then they just multiply and become super healthy. And in that multiplication, they then feed the soil food web. So all the plants that are plugged into the soil food web, that soil microbiome is now able to feed the plant roots with all the nutrients it needs, all the minerals. And then what happens is the plant literally transports those minerals to the plant surfaces, mostly the leaves. And in the leaves are very specialized cells called chloroplasts. And those chloroplasts have formed an allegiance with a bacteria from millions of years ago. And so those chloroplasts have a bacteria embedded in them. And that is what enables them to capture light at 100% efficiency. I'll say that again. 100% efficiency. That is just mind-blowing. Because the only way science can describe that plants can capture light at 100% efficiency is as if they know where light's going to be, that photon exactly. As in other words, it creates a quantum collapse field so that it meets the light in perfect space-time magic, like superstring theory, that enables it to know that the light is going to be there at that time and meets it. That's the only way science can explain it. So you've got microbes in the leaf surface capturing light and storing it in sugar batteries, carbohydrates, mangoes, bananas. Okay. Pumping that sugar down into the roots and feeding these microbes in the soil. And in exchange, those microbes are feeding them the nutrients, minerals, and the precursors to make proteins. So amino acids. So this is essentially two microbe colonies sending each other stuff. But those microbe colonies in the soil are connected through the fungal networks, which is like a whole neural network, to other trees, other funguses, other microbes. And so you start to see one giant organism connected. It just so happens that crystals and microbes are all communicating on the same frequency, which is this far infrared. And so they can digest infrared energy, which is like heat. So they're digesting sunlight on the leaf surfaces and in the soil. Now the wild part comes in is that humans also digest light. And when we eat that food that those plants have produced, and the plants, remember, are just basically giant microbe colonies, as I've just explained. So they've trapped, so if I eat that mango, or if I eat that moringa leaf full of protein, my body can't digest food. Only the microbes in my stomach can. So I'm not eating for my body, I'm eating for my microbes. I've got a perfect rainforest of microbes living in my gut, and my gut is designed to create a nice, warm, calm place for them to live. And so once I feed them, they start this digestive process, and our body, the lumen or the gut, what separates the body from the outside of the body, which is the gut, is 1 cell thick. That gut wall is 1 cell thick. And so it's a super intelligent membrane. And it opens up, grabs particles
pre-digested particles by these microbes in our guts, which are the same as the soil microbes, pulls them in, and then it takes those to the cell. And once it traveling through the bloodstream, once the cell recognizes these excretions of those microbes, it'll pull them across the cell membrane and then into proximity of the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the human cell. There can be, in an active cell like a heart cell, there can be up to 50,000 mitochondria in a cell. But it pulls in this nutrient molecule and it does the reverse. It cracks that ATP ADP bond, adenosine triphosphate. So the colonies in the leaf surfaces, which were trapping sunlight and bonding it into this ATP, it's at the cell, at the mitochondria, that cracks it open and releases that little photon or that sunlight that was trapped over there. So microbes are controlling the whole metabolic pathway. The capture of light and turning it into matter, and the breaking of matter and returning it back into light, or this living energy. So life then, humans, animals, everything all depends on its ability to capture, move, and access this light, this living light. And it's now been shown that the human body is incredibly designed to extract this light right across the spectrum, through the sensory organs and through the cellular tissue itself. Our blood, our cells, even our bones are photoreceptive. Some scientists now are reckoning that up to 2/3 of our energy in this form of ATP is downloaded directly from light. That's pretty wild.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. All right. Where are we going? Loosely back to Ormus.
So Ormus.
Ormus, or the whole. We can go about Ormus for hours, but enormous.
No, so the Ormus, the Ormus part of the enormous, is, so Ormus acts like a superconductor.
Yep.
But it's a biological superconductor. It's like a consciousness superconductor.
Yep.
And so in the soil, it allows that whole beginning of that interaction, the biology communities in the leaf surfaces and the biology communities in the soil to become like super productive, super biological systems, super robust. And it's, if I can use our computer systems as an analogy, it's like going from dial-up to fiber optic. It means that all of a sudden this huge amount of light is available in the system.
Well, that's the way I like to explain it too. That's the way I understand Ormus as well. Is that in a sense it almost like increases the bandwidth available of the sun's spectrum to provide energy.
Yeah.
In a sense, like you're opening up to more light.
And essentially it's running totally counter to, let's say, chemtrails.
Yep.
So
let's not get lost in chemtrails.
We won't get lost in chemtrails, but just to give you the perspective, is if chemtrails are nanoparticles of metallic crystals, and as they come through a jet fuel heated up to 700 degrees, they form these nanometallic crystals. Think about a suntan cream. Think about a sun block. Zinc oxide, titanium dioxide. You've got these two metals, and in that form you put them on your skin and it'll absorb all the UVA and UVB before it gets to your skin. It's a total UV blocker. So think of those metal particles floating around in the sky, whether they're strontium, barium, aluminium. They are absorbing very specific parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now imagine our sun is just like a local ISP. So it's in communication with all the suns, the great central suns. And screw what they say about light moving at 369 100,000 seconds
Yeah,
per
yeah,
second,
yeah.
whatever it is, light consciousness, the aspect of it that's the living consciousness aspect, moves infinitely fast across space-time. So all the suns communicate through our sun instantaneously, and our sun then creates a digest of all the living light information in the cosmos and feeds it to us. So blocking, consciously or unconsciously, I'm not going to go into this whole chemtrail thing now, creating these
artificial atmospheres.
artificial atmospheres
Yeah,
are killing the cloud-like microbe colonies, which itself are acting like the microbe colonies on our skin, which give our skin protection against the sun.
yeah. And that's one of the things a lot of people forget about microbes. Is that they're just fucking everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're flying through time and
They're
space.
in the water.
Trillions of
They're
them.
in the air.
Yeah.
They're in our bodies. They're everywhere,
Well,
and they're all communicating like one giant cloud-like organism.
Yeah.
And so, War of the Worlds is the story of this advanced technological culture, transhuman type beings coming to the Earth, trying to take over the Earth with their high tech, and get defeated by microbes. And that's what they are. The reason they constantly morph is because it's like a rolling crypto code that's constantly changing. So if you go, that's the weakness, and try to kill all the microbes, unless you kill them all, which is virtually impossible, those ones that live, they breed, and now they're immune. And so it's part of the Earth's immune system, the same immune system that is your body. The integrity of your gut microbes determines the integrity of your immune system and the integrity of your consciousness. What you think and how you think and what you eat will change that. And so the development of Enormous was like Rudolf Steiner's dream of addressing the consciousness of people at the time, because he could already see the soil was degrading. He introduced the biodynamic lectures so that people could start to grow nutrient-dense food and start to wake up. So that's why he introduced the biodynamic lectures. So I was formulating ormus and fulvic acid and zeolite together as a complex to super stimulate the soil microbes to grow nutrient-dense plants that wouldn't need fertilizers, wouldn't need pesticides, and grew nutrient density and alkaloids that were not only so efficacious that your food would become your medicine, but because the communication network would then open up between human and plant, human and microbe, those plants could then super plastically morph their morphology, their bodies, and start to produce alkaloids on demand for humans, for healing, for consciousness. And so my experimentation with using Enormous, for example, on vegetables, the taste, the shelf life, the speed at which they grew, amazing. But as soon as we started to use it on medicinal plants and psychoactive plants, it was a whole different story. So the medicinal plants would not only become more efficacious, like richer, stronger medicinally, the psychoactive plants would then become more potent and high vibrational. And the first people that actually alerted us to this were dope growers. You know, they were using our product and other similar products to grow marijuana, and they were noticing that not only were their plants growing faster and more robust, but that the quality of the plants they started with was being superseded, and they were getting buds of a way higher quality, and going, wow, what happened here? And so then we started to recognize a pattern. And so there's a French word called terroir, And terroir describes a whole bunch of different things. So, you could grow grapes in this valley, but then you take them to this valley and they're slightly different. So when you make wines from the exact same grape cultivars, but in these two different valleys, they're quite different. And so the French went, well, it's a little bit of the soil, it's a little bit slightly different climate, it's the human interaction, how happy is the guy stomping the grapes, a whole bunch of different processes become the terroir. And the same as the terroir of your body. Your mental, emotional, spiritual disposition, what you feed, your gut microbes, what you think about when you eat, who you share it with, how happy you are, how depressed you are, what music you listen to. All of these things are affecting your terroir. And so that's why the ancients were using the ormus for humans, making it out of gold. And for those of you interested, there's a whole bunch of information out there from books from Lawrence Gardner, whether some of it's spin, maybe all of it's spin, Lost Secrets of the Sacred Ark, where you can listen to the stories of the Sumerians and the Egyptians and the Grail Kings and their use of this ormus for extended life periods from tens to hundreds to thousands of years to higher states of consciousness, what they were doing, what they were trading for it, and then the technology that was being used to create an ark to anneal the gold, to make the white powder gold in Egypt, the mufkuts. That was then taken by Akhenaten or Moses out of Egypt, and the Egyptian dynasties collapse, and then the birth of the Judaic lineages and the Judaic kings and King Solomon, and then they build the whole temple around this ark. And this ark is like this magical thing that they have to pick up with sticks, and you could only be a high priest to go near it, otherwise you die, and it's has all these weird stories. But they were using that technology to make this manna, this white powder gold. And so the story of this ormus is thousands of years old, but the most potent point is that your body is designed to harvest ormus from its environment. So your nose, throat and lungs are designed to harvest ormus from the air. And you see cultures, whether it's Qigong or Pranayama or the Wim Hof method, where you set up a particular rhythm of breathing, rebirthing, and all of a sudden the body is flooded with prana, because now you breathing and you're filtering, and your nose and all the blood vessels and everything's designed to pull the prana out of the air. Your eyes are designed to pull prana out of light. Whether you're looking at a mandala or whether you're looking at a forest or a waterfall or the sky, if you see beauty, if you see order, if you're in love, then all of a sudden now you can harvest ormus, prana, chi from light directly. If you hear something beautiful, be it a bird sound or some music, and you go, wow, that's beautiful. That is literally, you can feel alive. It can make you get up and dance. That is your body extracting ormus from that sound vibration. So each of the body senses, whether it's the skin or the lungs and nose or the eyes or the ears or the mouth, is designed to extract ormus from the whole electromagnetic spectrum. And the stomach and the digestion is the grossest and lowest.
Yeah.
And so, for example, your skin has colonies of microbes. Apparently there's about 1,400 species in your belly button alone. Okay.
Yep.
Now, what are they doing on your skin surface? Okay. So it's known that the body produces lipids and sloughs off dead skin cells, which is literally what these microbes are living on and feasting on. But they serve a whole bunch of really interesting services. It's shown that they capture light. And once they get a certain amount of light, they actually start to shift the amount of melanin and produce tanning, which allows you to absorb more light and synthesize more light directly.
Yeah, I've never thought about that.
And so if you washing your skin every day with an antibacterial soap, you're getting rid of your light digestive ability of the surface of the skin, which is pretty big. You're getting rid of your skin's immune system, and you're getting rid of the membrane intelligence of your skin to deal with all sorts of other pathogens and microbes. And so it's counterintuitive, but the more soap you use on your skin, the more you're exposing yourselves to pathogens. You know, it's a long story, but like, for example, you go into the ocean. The ocean is full of the salt water. The salt water is chock-a-block full of this ormus. You come out, you lie on the beach. Those little salt crystals start to form into these little, I don't know if you've seen those Malden salt, they're like little stepped pyramids.
Talking about.
Okay? So that's what's forming on your skin. Those stepped salt pyramids. Like those Mayan pyramids. What are they doing? They are acting like waveguides, like aerials for the light. They then are focusing or harmonizing sunlight like a waveguide straight to these microbe colonies. And so you lie on the beach a bit, you feel fantastic. Go for another swim. Lie in the sun a bit more. How do you feel that day? How do you feel that evening, that first day of your summer holiday or whatever? You charged. You don't even need to eat. You know what I mean? You're up late. You're like, wow, this is great. I should go on holiday more often. But so what I'm saying is, the body is designed to absorb this ormus from everywhere. When humans forgot how to do it, consciously, biologically, that's when they turned to making it out of, initially the first place they made it recorded is from a place called Chem in Egypt. And then the two branches come out of there, alchemy and chemistry, both from Chem.
Yep.
Yeah. And so they were taking the black sand and they were extracting the ormus. And then the whole trade in ormus and the Phoenicians and even up to the 1500s, the Europeans were buying bones from mummies in Egypt because they were so packed with ormus, the bones, that they would grind them up and made this panacea medicine called mummiae. That's what they were doing in the 15 and I think up to the 1600s.
And what was the purpose of the medicine?
Just the ormus in the bones.
So you just eat it and you just start feeling superhuman.
Yeah.
Concentrated. Imagine that for an ormus bone broth from a 1500-year-old mummy.
But to give you the perspective, so the body and humans knew how to extract ormus directly from the environment. At some stage in history, maybe Sumeria, there was a linkage broken. And then people needed to start working out how to extract ormus in the physical. And so then started this whole idea of ormus and chemistry and alchemy and the philosopher's stone and white powder gold and making ormus out of gold and extracting out of seawater. But ultimately, it leads back to the humans awakening and recognizing that they can extract from everywhere. And this is what some of the last vestiges of some of these cultures, whether it's Vedic culture and meditation or, and stories of Shiva and Krishna, or whether, and Vishnu, or whether it's stories of, Kuan Yin and Tai Chi and Qigong and, so the meditational breathing and energy concentration practices of these cultures, we've just left with these last little shimmering bits that we can travel up those rivers back to the source and tap into the true source, which is literally inside our bodies. The heart is the true kind of source, in a sense, of this generating field, which is like the magnetic attractor for ormus. Because when it goes into this quantum collapse field called love, then it turns on, it like opens up the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth, and wow, we can absorb almost from anywhere. And the psychoactive plants remind us of that. So you may take mushrooms and go, wow, I'm high. What does that mean? Wow, I'm now vibrating at this frequency. I'm in love. Now everything's beautiful. Nature's beautiful. Wow, listen to that bird. Wow, how good does the sun feel? Amazing does this orange taste? What's happening there is that all of nature is built on this stuff called love or ormus or chi or prana. And it's all trading the stuff. And then when we vibrationally tune into that, all we just see is everything's made out of light and vibration. Is because we've tuned to that. And then all of a sudden that's available to us. Then we don't need any intermediary feeding us. We may not need food, we may not need anything. Because that's when we're in pure flow consciousness. And so that the cultures like the Vedic and Chinese cultures, in fact all around the world, the old world cultures, whether they're going into trance or taking washuma, whatever, what they were doing was keeping a tradition of remembering how to keep that alive. Remembering that frequency, because it's through that frequency of love that the body heals and that we attain higher states of consciousness. And so as we moved into the dark energies, those people become outliers, artists, shamans, healers, that were the last people holding on to that frequency as we went through this darkness of this birth canal, and now we pop out into this next stage of a next golden age, and I think a lot of things may not make it, but a lot of things will.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Alright, so I got a question which I primed you up for earlier on, which is who are you and what is your agenda on Earth?
Okay. Who am I? So, it's a multi-dimensional question, because it's obvious that I'm this, I'm that, this is this and that's that. There's nothing that I'm not. I'm the stars and the moon and the sun and the oceans and the mountains. The little I is concerned that it's trapped in this flesh spacesuit. But this body, this beautiful, living, super intelligent community of a myriad beings, 10 times more cells that are not me, are not human, than are human. So this body is billions of years old, and not one being in my mother's lineage died before giving birth, as each being unfolded one after another. So it's like a cutting of a plant. So it's the same cells from my ancestor billions of years ago through my mother's lineage, and from my father's as well. So by the time they get together and donate their cellular intelligence of 2 multi-billion-year-old lineages to grow this, that's pretty incredible. And it's not, like I said, this is a colony of intelligent beings that has evolved all along the way. And so me, as the immortal spirit being, grows myself a body in the womb of my mother. And when I come out through that birth canal, I'm getting her fecal matter, her gut microbiome implanted, so that I can then start my own other super specialist colony and digest the world and light. So
Well, it's interesting if you look at the lineage, because when we think of evolution, we generally think of the physical body and the DNA and the genetic factors that are passed on. But the majority of the evolution, I mean, like, when we're talking about the evolution of the human species, we're talking about, you know, generation after generation after generation. But when we're talking about bacterial cultures that have evolved over this time, I mean, bacteria can be producing hundreds, thousands of times a day, new generations. And we're talking so...
Yeah, and they will probably colonize the planet first, produced all the oxygen, the water. You know, to this day, there's cyanobacteria, there's bacteria that eat hydrogen sulfide, that produce water as a byproduct. They're producing oxygen. They, as I said, they're capturing light, storing it in sugar. They're breaking it open. Those bacteria, those mitochondria in our cells are bacterial in origin. In other words, bacteria infiltrate every living system. Nothing happens without it. So, what I am, okay, is like this immortal spirit being, having a beautiful, intimate, loving relationship with this billions of year old other being, let's call it the Earth. And the Earth is growing me a spacesuit so that I can walk around in the physical world, in this greater body of mine. And so my role as human, why I came here, is possibly the same role as everyone else's on a general level. And that's to be a curator, a custodian. So my job here is, as an immortal spirit being, is while I've grown myself this body, is to choose. What am I going to choose? So the whole body is designed to sense through its senses. Oh, I like that. That's a good beat. Oh, I taste this food. Wow, she's beautiful. Whatever it is, beauty then becomes the guide. Okay? And so if we just follow our passion or our excitement, and we just follow that beauty, we know we're feeling the right thing when we feel orgasmic. We know we're on the right path when things look beautiful. When people are in love, we know what the right thing is because our body is tuned to follow that sensory. So our job as biosynthesizer is to digest these landscapes and go, yep. And if you live out in the bush, you know, maybe your job is to, not your job, maybe your life purpose is to eat that kangaroo. Why? Because that kangaroo has eaten those 50 different medicinal plants. It's digesting the landscape. You eating it, you super digesting the landscape. Then kangaroo lives in you. You live in kangaroo. Now that immortal spirit being is plugged into the earth even more so because now it's plugged into the earth through kangaroo dreaming, through all those medicinal plants, through those soil microbes. So there's kangaroo folding into human folding into kangaroo, folding into plants, folding into things. So we're biosynthesizing. We are being eaten and eating as we go as the body. But as the spirit being, our job is to feel those emotional things of the body, to feel where the body wants to go through the following of beauty, and to just follow that, because as we choose that apple, and we keep choosing that apple and planting the seeds, the apple goes, and then grows bigger and sweeter as it moves from the Himalayas as a little sour crab apple, as it moves across through towards the Middle East, and it gets bigger and sweeter, and by the time it hits, you know, Europe, it's a big sweet thing, and then it goes to the Americas, and then there's thousands of apple, big ones like this with hundreds of different types of sugars. That comes from the same plant. And so that plant is now moving and evolving with humans choosing those apples. And so as we choose, we create diversity, which strengthens life, which creates stability, which creates more consciousness, which creates more beings. As we plant more forests and cultivate more living systems, it gives the earth a bigger surface area to capture light or love and ground love in this dimension. So that's my job here, is to act as an anchor for divine love in this dimension, to allow light to move into matter is half my job. The other half is, as it comes in, is to keep spinning it higher and higher, and then as I transform the physical back into the spiritual, is to send it back to the source. So as I eat that kangaroo and eat that plant and eat that fruit, what do? I go to the landscape. I'm in praise and gratitude, and I sing and I dance. And that singing and dancing, or praying, or meditation, or painting, or healing, is the return of the physical. We've digested all that energy, and now it's just sound, and back it goes, back to the source. At a higher, if we can send it back at the same level or higher than it came, then we start to feed the sun. And then the sun and the earth become this one system, and everything goes up. So each one of us has the responsibility and the duty to be that. That's our only job, is to cultivate self-love. Everything else is a distraction. Cheers.
Cheers.